few months back, and I told her about it. She said, it's so cool. All the houses around have the clapboard, they're kind of backwards. And I said, yes, rough side out. We always said, what do you mean, rough side out? And I said, well, most clapboard has one planed, kind of smoothed out side, and then that's what most people use, but then Newfoundlanders, being practical like we are, we always, the paint sticks to the other part a little better. We don't care if it's ugly, we'll put that on the outside because it works better. And she said, Newfoundland and Newfoundland houses, or rather, Newfoundlanders and Newfoundland houses are both the same. They're both rough side out. And I said, you don't know the half of it yet. The first little bit here. When I was a boy, I had no idea about many things. I knew a few facts here and there, but I was absolutely sure about very little. I had more questions than answers. I was more curious than certain. Here's a list of the few things I did know. I knew I lived in Petty Harbour, a postcard-perfect traditional fishing community just 20 kilometers or so away from St. John's, the capital city of Newfoundland. I knew I was Catholic and not Protestant like that dubious crowd from the other side of the river. Don't laugh at that. Unless you're Protestant. The other side of the river, where are we? I knew I loved music and the Montreal Canadiens. If you're going to be a successful author, you got to be brave. I knew I loved music and the Montreal Canadiens. That's about it. I was certain about very little else. And come to think of it, even these facts were cause for confusion. I knew what town I lived in, but I was not totally sure what country. I thought I lived in a country called Canada, but my grandfather insisted I lived in a country called Newfoundland. I thought Newfoundland was my province, and Mom said that was the truth of it. But then she also said we were never to say that out loud when Granda was on the whiskey. Is Mom here? Mom and Dad still up? Sorry about this. Well, sorry about this whole book thing. I knew we were Petty Harbour folk. We lived around the bay, and as such we were Baymen. I did not live in town, so I was not a townie, which is what most Newfoundlanders call St. John's people. Townies agreed that I was indeed a Bayman, but as far as my Bayman cousins from more rural parts of Newfoundland were concerned, I might as well be a townie, because I lived so close to the city. Also, none of the Petty Harbour Doyles worked in town, and none of the Doyles were fishermen, as Baymen typically are. So this made me wonder if I was actually a Bayman or a townie. After all, confused? So was I. I did know I was Catholic and not Protestant, for sure. But I also knew that no matter how closely I looked at those strangers across the river, I couldn't see much difference between us and them. They went to different schools than we did. They wore the same clothes, did the same jobs, liked the same sports. On rare occasions, when I attended the Protestant church for weddings or funerals, their church services didn't seem to be way different than ours. Why, I wondered, didn't we just make one big church, or why didn't we go to their church or they come to ours? I was told in no uncertain terms that I was most definitely a Catholic, but I honestly could not figure out why I had to be part of one religion or the other. I knew I belonged to a musical family. I loved music more than anything. But not just the kind my friends at school liked. My parents and extended family were well versed in Newfoundland and Irish music, especially the Clancy brothers and beloved singer-songwriters like Johnny Cash, Cat Stevens, and Chris Christopherson. My uncles, who I idolized, played in a rock and roll band. They played live covers of artists like Buddy Holly and Elvis and Creedence and the Beatles. They had records of heavier bands I loved, like Led Zeppelin and Cream. That was mostly Dennis and Paul. He had those good ones. And I believe the Average White Band, Bernie. Do you remember? The W was like a lady's bum. It was fantastic. That's not part of the book. The Beatles. They had records of heavy metal. From a young age, I was surrounded by music of all kinds, but I really had no idea what kind of music I was supposed to like. I knew hockey was a big deal in Petty Harbour.
No, you wrote it. I didn't.
I knew that hockey was a big deal in Petty Harbour, and just about everybody around me cheered for the Detroit Red Wings. Gordie Howe made such an impression on his generation that children born into a Red Wings household had no choice but to follow suit. My father was a Wings man, but in a gesture of true open-mindedness, he did not insist that I follow him down the Gordie path. When I was around 10 years old, the Montreal Canadiens won 4 Stanley Cups in a row, and I fell in love with the Habs. I was the only Canadiens fan in the extended Doyle family, and folks insisted I must be cracked. So I knew in my hockey heart I loved the Habs, but I was made to feel by my family that this was a terrible, terrible mistake. Somehow through all this, I knew I belonged to Petty Harbour. There was never a doubt about that. I was a Petty Harbour dog, born and bred. Now don't get me wrong, when I was young, I didn't spend a lot of time dwelling on who I was or what I was, or whether I was a Canadian Newfoundlander or a Newfoundland Canadian. But there were times when I did feel that even though I knew where I was from, I didn't know quite how to fit in. Here was Alan Doyle, son of Tom and Jean, neither Tommy or Baby, not quite true Catholic, but certainly not Protestant. A music lover who wasn't sure what music to love, and all I really wanted to be was a rock star or the goalie for the Montreal Canadiens, but I was pretty sure neither of those careers was available. So what was I supposed to do? How was I supposed to act? I really had no idea. And that was...
Just gotta drink this 1 second.
I really had no idea. And that was the best thing that could have ever happened to me. That's the first bit. Thank you. I'm going to ask Nita